Well, we are very excited to have you here today and honored to have you here today. We've got a very special guest in Adrianne from the DOSED movie, which is an award-winning movie that has kind of swept a lot of film festivals in the last year and really done a lot to show people some of the healing benefits of these plant medicines that some of us are really passionate about. And this conversation here today is called A Conversation on Mental Health, Addiction, and Psychedelics. And really, I'd like to emphasize that that's really what it is. It's a conversation. Adrianne and I have really become good friends over the course of the last couple of years since we've been a part of this film, which featured her life as she was going through some very harrowing circumstances. And yeah, there's been a lot of ups and downs through that entire process. And it's 2 years now since it's been just over 2 years since what happened in the end of that movie. And I guess before I go further, I want to really emphasize that this entire webinar is one big spoiler for the DOSED movie. So if you haven't seen DOSED yet, I really encourage you to realize that you can watch the recording of this anytime. It will be up on our Facebook page after we change it over once it's been recorded. So if you haven't seen DOSED yet, I encourage you to right now, rather than watching this interview, go to dosedmovie.com and check that out. So there's our spoiler alert right there. And as I've said to Nick and Tyler, who are the gentlemen who produced and directed the movie, Adrianne really is a walking spoiler alert. So it's great to be here with her right now. And why don't I let you say hi, Adrianne?
Sure. Hi everyone. Nice to see you, Trevor. And yeah, thanks for everyone for tuning in. And it's really great to be here. It's good to see your face.
Yeah, good to see you. It's crazy times for sure.
Yeah, it is.
You know, I think we used to see each other a little more frequently since COVID started, but
yeah.
You know, these days, whatever, it's interesting times, no doubt. And I think, you know, in light of these interesting times, I think a lot of people are going through different kind of maybe major mental health crises. And I think that makes it even more important that we discuss what these plant medicines and psychedelic medicines might be able to do for people. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Before we started, I've just like, let's just have a minute for mindfulness here and just let everybody that's a part of this right now and watching just to kind of drop in. And we're all kind of living hectic lives right now. So let's take a moment to just ground ourselves in a bit of presence. And I'm going to do a bit of a meditation that is really new to me. And it's through a really cool show that I encourage everybody to check out on Netflix called A Midnight Gospel. It's a show by Duncan Trussell. And on the 8th episode, the season finale, he actually has his mother on the show. Her name is Deneen Fendig, and she just had this beautiful little meditation that I'll just take us through quickly here to kind of get in the spirit of what these medicines can bring us to, which is an incredible presence and awareness. So the meditation is to first focus on your index finger. Let's say your index finger of your right hand. And focus inside your index finger. Feel the energy that is flowing inside. Just note what that feels like. And then feel inside of your whole hand, but from the inside. And just allow that awareness to permeate you. And then you can focus on your entire arm. What does it feel like inside that entire right arm? And then both of your arms. Focus on that awareness inside both of your arms, and then both of your legs. What's it like to feel all four of those at once? And then you can expand that to, while keeping your eyes closed if you've closed them, what do you see? What's your sense of sight registering even with the eyes closed? And then what do you hear? So I just thought that was a really sweet meditation to bring us into a state of presence. And it's very of the moment, because people that enjoy psychedelics will really enjoy that wild animation called A Midnight Gospel. I highly recommend it. There's another Netflix film I'll recommend right now as well. It just came out called Have a Nice Trip. And it's got a whole bunch of celebrities speaking about their psychedelic journeys. So I think these are cool tools to help mainstream and kind of take away the stigma from some of these. So yeah, I'll just introduce myself quick, and then I'll ask Adrianne to introduce herself quick. For those of you that don't know us, I am Trevor Millar. I am the chair of the board for an organization called MAPS Canada. MAPS is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. I came to that through my work with a plant medicine called ibogaine. And ibogaine is really good at helping people overcome opioid addiction and really most addictions. It's a really good negative pattern interrupter. And it was through my work with that medicine that I was invited to become a part of this project that we're going to be talking about here, which was a documentary that features Adrianne, and the cameras followed her around as she was trying to kind of overcome her addiction. So I'll pass the floor over to Adrianne. Maybe you could just do a quick introduction of yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, my name is Adrianne, and I was the subject of the documentary film DOSED. So DOSED followed me through my journey using psychedelics to recover from heroin addiction and other substances. So yeah, through the documentary, we discovered ibogaine also, which I had not heard about. And through that, I was able to detox and get sober. And I have now been sober for almost 2.5 years, which is really amazing. It's hard to believe, but yeah, I'm very grateful for that.
Well, what do you think about that? Like, just, you know, when you think about kind of back to your life before you realize psychedelics might be an answer to addiction, you know, for somebody that I know, you struggled for years to try and overcome your addiction. Now that you're almost 2.5 years sober, like, does that even, if you try and see that from your own old frame of mind, does it even seem possible? Or
no, I mean, almost every day when I wake up sober, it's just mind blowing. I had struggled to get sober for probably close to 10 years. You know, I remember going, you know, into recovery or treatment center and seeing people that were a month sober, and I couldn't even imagine that. That was just seemed unfathomable to me. So, and, you know, I relapsed a lot, and I got quite discouraged, and it was really challenging. So I never thought I would see the day that I would be 2.5 years sober. So seems like it was a long time ago, but at the same time, it doesn't seem like it was a long time ago. But yeah, it's really amazing.
yeah. And what do you think, like, just in light of the fact that your story was featured in a movie, like when we were showing this movie at theaters, when we were still allowed to go in theaters together, it seems like a lifetime ago. You know, people so often commented on your strength and courage and vulnerability for allowing cameras to follow you around through such an intense process. Like, what was that decision-making process like for you, that you did think this might be a good idea to allow these filmmakers who you barely even knew, was my understanding. Yeah. Like, how did that all go down?
Yeah, I mean, I guess at the beginning of all this, I definitely didn't think as far ahead as that I would see myself on a big screen. But I definitely was interested in psychedelics. I'd heard about psychedelics. And when Tyler, who I had known Tyler for a number of years, we had been friends. I didn't know Nick. I met Nick through Tyler. But when he suggested, you know, trying psychedelics, I was definitely all for that. And he also suggested maybe we could film it. And I thought that would be a really good idea, because I just thought, you know, imagine if this did work. Imagine if I was able to get sober and overcome this. How cool would that be if we had documented this whole process for other people to see? But that being said, I definitely didn't envision the success that it would have had. And sitting in a theater with hundreds of other people watching myself on screen, I didn't really think that part through. But I'm so grateful that I did, because, you know, I've gotten such positive feedback from people. So many people reach out to me and tell me how much the movie has given them inspiration or helped them. So really, that's right there is the purpose of me going through this whole process, was obviously to get myself sober, but to help other people find that path.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like I think about just the impact, and I've seen it in audiences now, and in interacting with audiences as we were showing this. Like, for one, so many people have, like, it blows my mind that you started this movie and you hadn't even heard of Iboga or Ibogaine before. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so much the case for so many people that come to this movie. Is, you know, I always joke that it seems like it's a nice little movie about mushrooms, and then Ibogaine comes in and says, "Excuse me, pardon me, out of the way here. Let's see what we can do." So yeah. It's you know, it's really a gift. It's a light that allows people to see that there is a way. I think it's provided a lot of inspiration for people, because for so many people, addiction is just this debilitating thing that you never expect you'll be able to overcome some of those days when you're so caught up in it.
Yeah, it can be very dark. And I mean, it was the same process for me. I thought we were just doing a little documentary about microdosing and mushrooms, and then Iboga just kind of found its way in there. And I'm obviously very grateful for that. But that definitely wasn't on our radar when we started this documentary. We were really interested in microdosing and mushrooms. But yeah, as you'll see in the film, that shifts at some point. And
yeah.
Well,
the working title of this movie, when we all became a part of it, it was called Microdose Me.
Exactly, yeah.
And then we realized there's a way to tell that, how that title was used in the story. But at the end of the day, Dosed is a more appropriate title for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So speaking of that first time that you saw yourself on the big screen like that, first of all, how many times have you seen the movie now?
How many times? I think I've been to 3 screenings. We went to LA. We had I've been to the first show at the Rio, and then we also had the big show at the Vogue, which was great. So I've seen it 3 times now. Yeah. And I still don't remember the whole movie, because it's still so emotional when I watch it. And it's hard for me to know what part, because obviously I lived through the whole thing. So it's hard for me to remember what actually made it into the movie and what was just my experience. But that was really overwhelming the first time I saw it. I think I cried the whole way through. It was really, really moving. Yeah.
Wow. So what happened? Like, I remember through this process, I had seen a rough cut. I had probably seen 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 rough cuts, and you still hadn't seen the movie. And I know a lot of us were like, do we even show Adrianne before it goes live? And you were questioning whether or not you even wanted to see it in the theater. In the end, you did see it in the theater. You had a great big team of friends around you. And I seem to remember there were a lot of tears through that first screening.
I definitely at some point in the journey thought, you know, maybe I'm not going to watch this movie. Maybe I don't want to watch it, just because obviously I had moved past that place and I had gotten to a really good place in my life, and watching myself relive that really dark and painful time was not really something that I wanted to do. But ultimately I did decide to go to the screening at the Rio. I'm very happy that I did. I think it was very therapeutic and healing for me to see that too. Like, it was difficult to watch myself, but also it was so amazing to see how far I had come, and actually just to see myself, I could really, there was just something about my eyes, or like there was a spark that was gone. I just felt like I looked like a bit of a zombie, and you can see that transition throughout the film where that spark comes back and I become alive again and sort of reconnect with myself. So that was really lovely to see. And it's a good reminder of where I was and how far I've come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. Like as I remember saying to you before you saw it for the first time, because I was worried about how you're going to react, and said, yeah, like this just might trigger you like crazy. So I remember keep saying to you, remember, it's a happy ending.
Yeah.
Remember, it's a happy ending, because there are
Yeah,
some really intense moments there.
definitely.
So I just want to tell to everybody that's watching that if you do want to pose some questions to Adrianne, you can type those questions in the chat box. And then we've got a couple of great people in Jason and Pascal and Mark who are kind of going to forward those questions to us. So, you know, tell us about what happened with these psychedelics. Like what was the journey like? What do you think is the thing that happened that all of a sudden allowed you to overcome something as intense as heroin addiction? Like from your firsthand experience, like can you tell people kind of what that experience was like, that it's so profound that it can even help you overcome something as debilitating as heroin addiction?
Yeah, it's always so difficult to explain what a psychedelic experience is like. And also, I think it's very personal to each individual. But I mean, the only way I can describe it is having some kind of spiritual experience or just shift in perception. Obviously, with the Ibogaine, it really helped with the detoxes too, because that's the first thing that you have to overcome with addiction. But I think a lot of times people think that addiction is just the physical symptoms, the physical addiction to the drug, but it's so much more than that. It goes so much more deeper. There's, it's very complex. It's, you know, psychological, emotional, there's underlying trauma a lot of times. So, you know, many times I've gotten sober and gotten past the withdrawal period, but have, you know, gone back to using drugs and alcohol for whatever reason. So, it was just psychedelics, iboga, and mushrooms were just transformational. Like it was just a point in my life where I just saw everything differently. I just had this whole new perspective on life and my life, specifically like self-love. There was a lot of, I talk about that in the film, that the first time I did mushrooms, it was the first time I experienced self-love and self-compassion, which is something that I really struggled with. And I think a lot of people in active addiction really struggle with, is just that caring and love for yourself. And it just lifted a lot of that darkness. And mood-wise, I think Ibogaine has some kind of antidepressive properties, which you probably know more about with your extensive experience working with Ibogaine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ibogaine is interesting because I always tell people integration is really one of the key buzzwords around working with psychedelics. And integration is kind of like, how do you take the lessons learned in the psychedelic journey and turn them into change in your actual real life? I've heard recently too, integration is like making meaning out of your experience. And then there's implementation as well. So integration and implementation. And I feel like Ibogaine, it almost has like a built-in integration component to a certain degree, because the Ibogaine that you take in orally is then turned into something called noribogaine. And noribogaine is something that is stored in your fat cells and then kind of slowly releases into your system. So it's almost like you're on this pink cloud for a couple of months after the Ibogaine experience. So yeah, it's definitely got this antidepressant component to it, it seems. But you know, any good kind of psychedelic psychotherapy seems to have really good antidepressant qualities as well, and anti-anxiety, which I remember, you know, in the movie and in real life for us, you had a journey with mushrooms near the end of the movie as well. And I know that one of the big reasons you wanted to have that journey is you were still facing a lot of anxiousness and anxiety post Ibogaine. It's like, I will say to people, you know, for somebody who's been addicted to opioids, they're so used to reaching for a substance when they're kind of feeling low, and thankfully, you know, you made it far enough there that you didn't reach for an opioid. But
Yeah.
what was it about that last mushroom journey? If you could kind of explain to people what you felt through that last mushroom journey. It was a pretty cool experience to behold.
Yeah, that was really intense. Obviously, ibogaine is quite a trip, but I was detoxing through most of that, so a lot of it was very challenging. But by the time I'd done that mushroom sit with you, I was, you know, it had been a few months, and I was completely off all opiates, and I think I did about 7 grams. I think it was, and that was just that was probably one of the most significant, most profound events in my entire life. Yeah, it was, like I said, I saw God. I felt like I saw God, and I was an atheist before that. So it was a very profoundly spiritual experience. And I remember the next day, I think I told you, that was the first day in a lot that I could remember that, you know, I woke up on my own, or I woke up by my alarm, and not from anxiety. I didn't wake up with that anxious feeling. So yeah, it was really powerful. I recommend that therapeutic protocol, mushrooms.
Yeah, that's kind of the I think you were listening to the Johns Hopkins psilocybin playlist, which is Johns Hopkins University out of Baltimore. They've done probably arguably more research on psilocybin specifically. They really, especially in the new psychedelic renaissance, and even back to when they were Spring Grove in the 60s, they've done more work with psilocybin than just about anybody else. And they have this incredible playlist that they put on Spotify that, yeah, it's pretty wild playlist. And it's not all major keyed stuff. Like it's interesting how on a good psychedelic playlist, it's gonna, I say to people that it's almost like a pathway that people follow, and you go to places that you wouldn't necessarily go to if you didn't hear that kind of music. Do you have any comments on listening to a playlist like that while you're going through a journey like that?
I think that's really important. Yeah, it's sort of, sometimes it takes you places that you don't want to go. Some of the music is challenging, but I feel like I've had difficult, you know, some of the journey can be difficult, but it's supposed to be, because it helps you come out the other side. And then there's a lot of really beautiful music. So I've actually never done mushrooms any other way, actually, because I've only done them therapeutically. So I've always had some kind of music, but I found that playlist really helpful to just carry you through, especially with the blindfold, just so that you stay internally. So I think that's really powerful. But I was just wondering, like, if you wanted to maybe talk about, since we're on the subject, how you got involved with ibogaine or in this space of psychedelics. I know I've heard you share a little bit about that, but maybe you can just tell everyone else about what your story is.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. I just, after 9/11, after September 11th, I was in my early 20s, and I was really distraught with the state of the world. And I started looking for different ways that I might be able to give back. And I was relatively new to Vancouver at the time, and the downtown east side of Vancouver, which is known as the poorest postal code in Canada, because when you do the census, it is technically the poorest postal code in Canada. It looked like it needed help. So I kind of very naively just started looking at different ways that I might be able to help out down there. And that essentially turned into about a 10-year networking and researching project. And in 2009, through a conversation, ibogaine came on the radar as a way that might be able to help. And I kind of quickly got associated to ibogaine in Vancouver just because of a couple of contacts that I had, including Mark Hayden, who is now the executive director of MAPS Canada. And it took about 2 years, but within 2 years, I met somebody who became my business partner, Gareth Moxie, who is also featured in DOSED. I think he has the single greatest moment in that whole movie where he says she needs an ibogaine treatment, and mushrooms are helping, but for somebody who's addicted to opioids, there's really nothing but ibogaine that's going to help like that. So Gareth and I started our business Liberty Route, and you know, I find that when you're on the right path, all the right doors open. So very quickly, Dr. Gabor Mate became a friend and a supporter, and he introduced us to a physician who would work with us. And we had lots of nurses who would work with us. So we would essentially bring people in for a 10-day treatment. And when we were doing this, we were legally able to do this because ibogaine was listed as a natural health product in Canada. And Health Canada actually knew what we were doing, and we would bring up to 3 people at a time in for 10 days at a time, and we treated about 200 people. So it's a harrowing process for pretty much everybody, as I'm really glad the movie didn't make it seem like it's an easy thing to do, because ibogaine is not easy to go through, whether you're detoxing or not. Generally, it's kind of the dark horse of psychedelics, almost for a good reason, because there is a danger around a cardiotoxicity issue that needs to be screened for, and you need to be very careful during the process because of that. But at the same time, it's really great at interrupting those negative patterns. So I've seen some pretty cool things, and just seen some beautiful transformations in doing this work. And then in 2017, ibogaine was put on the prescription drug list in Canada. So that doesn't make it immediately available as a prescription. It still needs to go through phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials to get a drug identifier number so that it could then be used as a prescription, but we're a long way away on that. So unfortunately, none of us are really doing much work with ibogaine right now, which is really sad because, as you know, the opioid crisis is still kind of a thing. People are dying every single day from this opioid crisis. So it's sad that we don't have all the tools in the toolbox to make these things available.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's really, it's always challenging for me. I get asked a lot, people like, how do they access these treatments? And, you know, unfortunately, like for the most part, a lot of people can't access them because they're cost prohibitive, or they're just not accessible to a lot of people. I feel really lucky that I found this community and was able to be helped. So my hope is that you know, this will be something in the near future that will be available legally to everyone if that's what they choose. So yeah.
Tell me about community. You've got a whole bunch of new friends since this started. How important was the community that came around you to this whole process?
Yes, community is really, really important. You know, I always say that you can't do this alone, and you don't have to do this alone. I think that addiction is a disease of loneliness. I felt really, really lonely and isolated, and we're social beings, and we need to feel connected to others, and we need to have the support of others. So, I mean, whatever that community is to you, you know, I found this plant medicine community. I also have family and friends and other recovery communities that are extremely important for my ongoing recovery. And that's really important for anyone that's, you know, looking to get into recovery and stay sober, or just anybody for mental health. Generally, having a strong support network. And sometimes I feel like, especially living in a city like Vancouver or any big city, that can be difficult at times. It can feel a little bit lonely, feel like you can get lost. But there's always communities that you can hook into. And yeah, I personally have a recovery community that I stay connected with, and all the plant medicine people in this community that I have to support me. So yeah, so really important.
How about more on that? You know, psychedelics aren't necessarily the traditional way of overcoming addiction. What do you think of some of those more traditional ways? And do you think they dovetail well into what psychedelics can do for a person, or are they just so night and day that they aren't really relatable?
I definitely think, I mean, I don't think that there's any one road to recovery. I think everybody has their own path to recovery, and that's something that they need to work out for themselves. Everybody's a little bit different. But like I said, I want all options to be available to everybody. You know, there's Smart Recovery, there's AA. I'm sure there's lots of other, I've been seeing some kind of like 12-step based psychedelic recovery programs pop up, which is something that I would be really interested in. I know that some recovery 12-step might not be super open to psychedelics because they're seen as a drug or a substance. I don't ascribe to that. I think that they have a place. And really, like in the 12 steps, the purpose of the 12 steps is to have a spiritual awakening, to overcome your addiction. And that's sort of what psychedelics did for me. And I think all the principles in a lot of recovery programs are still useful and can be used in conjunction with psychedelics. And I have done many other things in my recovery over the last 2 years. You know, I've done some holotropic breath work, meditation, yoga. You know, I've started exercising, which is something I didn't do and which is really helpful. I did some neurofeedback, which was really amazing. So there's many, many avenues, and I think that they can all be used in conjunction with psychedelics. It's just, psychedelics are a really powerful tool. It's not like, for me, it's not a cure-all. It didn't cure everything for me. I still struggle day to day with life stuff like everyone does, but it's a really powerful tool that helped me overcome some really difficult things.
Yeah, I just saw a question come up around microdosing. Microdosing obviously wasn't the route that was needed for you to find sobriety, but is microdosing helping on a day-to-day or week-to-week? Have you been plugged into microdosing very much since?
I actually just started a microdosing regimen maybe 2 weeks ago. It's not something that I've done a lot of. I personally have found the large doses to be super helpful. I'm very, very sensitive. My system is very sensitive. So sometimes I've found getting the right dose of microdosing is a bit of a challenge because I can find it a little bit activating. I have to make sure that, you know, I'm in a quiet space for most of the day. But I actually just started a regimen a couple weeks ago. And while I'm still kind of figuring out my dosing, I didn't immediately notice a change. But then when I look back at the last 2 weeks, like I've started running and I've started doing a lot more positive things because this quarantine has been a little bit challenging for a lot of people, and it's getting a little bit down and feeling a little bit isolated. So I really think that the microdosing over the last couple of weeks has helped me with that. So, I mean, I would encourage anyone to try it. I mean, yeah, why not?
Yeah, maybe for people that don't know, microdosing is just taking a sub-perceptual dose of these medicines. So maybe 1/10 of a dose of mushrooms, as an example, would be a microdose, and it seems to have a really good antidepressant effect and kind of helps people in many different ways. I'm getting questions coming in here. So this is a question from members of VAPS. So that's the Victoria Psychedelic Society. How was your experience in facing and healing trauma through psychedelic psychotherapy? So that's one of the big issues that comes up in the movie is there past trauma that needed to be healed, and what happened inside the house? And I love how it all kind of gets summed up at the end. I love how it got summed up at the end where you say, everybody's got their house. It really doesn't matter what was in my house, but people are still want to know what was in the house.
Yeah.
Can you comment on that? And then what do you think about using these to heal trauma?
Yeah, so I haven't really gone searching to unearth any deep-rooted specific traumas. There's been a lot of things that have come up over, you know, my psychedelic use and my therapies. Like I said, it doesn't really matter specifically what like my issues are. And I don't get into that too much because everybody has their own. What's traumatic to one person may not be traumatic to another person. And for me, it's more about coping day to day and learning how to process my emotions in a healthy way. Because at some point along the line, I didn't learn how to do that, or I stopped doing that, and drugs and alcohol became a way for me to cope. So really what it's been about more is just feeling comfortable having uncomfortable emotions, feeling comfortable asking for help and reaching out to my support network, and, where all those feelings of, self-doubt and, insecurity and like self-hatred and self-harm came from. It's like working through that and learning how to love myself and be connected with myself. So that's what psychedelics really helped me to do.
Yeah, a metaphor I often use when speaking to people about these therapies is that it's like it's like as we live, it's like we see life through a filter, like a pane of glass that we're seeing everything through. And there is us on one side of it, then there's the pane of glass. And as our heart gets broken, as things happen to us, it's like that glass gets dirty. And then we can't see things quite as clearly. Therefore, we're not behaving in a way that reflects a clear pane of glass, really. And I really feel like it's good psychedelic psychotherapy. I really don't think it adds anything to you at all. I think it really is a process of cleaning you out, almost like sandblasting you out from the inside, and so that you then see clearly again. And once you see things clearly, it's like, oh, actually, life is kind of awesome. And something you said in the movie and to me in real life was the anxiety that you felt was just life trying to get in. And it's like, just because of maybe what was dirtying your own glass, you couldn't allow that life to come in. Can you comment on that?
Exactly.
I love that statement, that anxiety was just life trying to get in. What was that like?
Yeah, exactly. I think that, I was always using drugs and alcohol to numb feelings. Like I just got, so even positive feelings sometimes, like being too happy or too excited, like I just got to a point where just feeling anything was really uncomfortable for me, and I didn't know how to process that. So psychedelics have helped me, and just other work that I've done have just helped me be okay, just allowing emotions to come and go. And yeah, I love that analogy that you used too, that it's not so much about digging into the past. It's about shaping how I see or seeing things differently today, and coping differently with life today, and seeing life in different terms today, and moving forward with that rather than focusing on, what has happened in the past or specific details. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I see Lana has a question here that it says, in the film, Adrianne said that plant medicine and Western medicine need to talk to each other instead of butt heads. As someone who went through addiction treatment with both modalities, can she expand on this? And does she still feel this way? I think that is another great moment where, your hands come together and say,
yeah,
these worlds just need to speak to each other.
Yeah, I think I was feeling really frustrated at that point because, I was in the medical system and I had prescription medications and doctors, and, a lot of the doctors and nurses were really great, but a lot of times they weren't supportive at all and outright, against what I was doing and discouraged me from going down this route. Or even if doctors and nurses weren't doing that, they just didn't know, right? Like they didn't know how to support me through this. Some of them were quite encouraging, and but they just didn't know anything about psychedelic medicine. So that was really frustrating for me. I felt like I was between two worlds. Like I really knew that psychedelics were the road that I wanted to go down and that they were really helpful. But, there were times when I needed to be in the Western medical system, and then just kind of straddling those two worlds could be really frustrating. And it was really difficult to navigate all of that too. And I just feel like, I feel like people should have access to psychedelics in whatever context they want, whether it's spiritual or traditional, but also I look forward to where people can seek, psychedelic treatment in our Western medical model, in a safe, supported way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I do look forward to seeing that be integrated.
Yeah. And as you know, we've started a decriminalization petition. So in Canada, there's a petition process where you only need to get 500 electronic signatures, and the petition that you've started will get read in the House of Commons, and the government must respond. So we started a petition towards decriminalizing plant medicines here in Canada. And we had those first 500 signatures within 12 hours. We had 1,001 signatures in the first 24 hours. We're now sitting at almost 5,000 signatures. And our goal is a lot more than that. We really want to make a big impact. So the more signatures, the better. So I encourage everybody that's watching to please go to decriminalizenature.ca/petition. And that will bring you straight to this Government of Canada website. And that brings me to a question around the fact that, what do you think about there were basically a whole bunch of laws broken in order to kind of make you healthy and whole through this process. Do you think our prohibitive laws are fair, or do you think people should be labeled criminals? I know your answer to that, but
I mean, no, definitely not. Especially because, I mean, I don't really think that criminalizing a health issue is, you know, even with heroin or any other street drugs, I don't feel like that is, I think the war on drugs is an absolute failure, and it does more to harm than it does to help anyone. But specifically with psychedelics, which there has been shown to be a lot of medical value for mental health, you know, end of life, so many things. I mean, I see studies, I see articles every day just with new, you know, uses or contexts for psychedelic therapy. So, yeah, I mean, I never really worried too much about breaking the law, because obviously I was breaking the law every day when I was using illicit drugs. So this didn't seem like an issue to me. But obviously, you know, I worry about people that are sticking their neck out there to help people like me. You know, I'm so grateful to all the people that rallied together and really, you know, put their asses on the line, because they're doing something that the government sees as illegal and they could potentially get in trouble. And that's just insane to me, because I mean, I'm just one anecdotal, you know, case. But this has changed my life dramatically. And I've talked to so many other people who have been helped by these medicines too. So it just seems totally absurd that they would be criminalized.
yeah, absolutely. Another thing that's come up in a lot of panels, and I think more when you're not in the audience, this question comes up, but through the movie, it's basically a whole bunch of men who came together in different capacities to help you on this journey. Did you notice in the moment that you were surrounded by men? Like, did that come up to you through the process at all, or post the process?
I mean, I definitely noticed. It was never anything that was a concern to me. You know, I think it's really beautiful to see all these men in healing roles, and everyone was so lovely. I was always felt super safe, and I always felt heard. And so it was never an issue for me, obviously. I noticed. And, you know, that was just to Tyler and Nick really did a lot of research and reached out to people. And these were the people that put out their hand to help, right? And that were willing to do it on camera and basically, you know, out themselves. So that's just the way it played out. You know, there's always room for more women in every space, but I think there are a lot of women in this space. I just went to a MAPS conference not too long ago, Women in Psychedelic Science. So there's some women doing amazing work. I've also worked with some other women that, you know, weren't in the film, doing holotropic breath work, neurotherapy, neurofeedback. Yeah, there's lots of women in this space, and I met them at conferences. So, but I'm always happy to see more representation and diversity in any space, obviously. And that's something that we should always work towards.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's just some more questions from the crowd here. I don't know if you can think of any of this, but what were some of the scenes/stories/content that was cut or edited out from the film that you wish had made it in? Is there anything like that?
I can't really think of anything.
I think it's amazing. Like, Tyler and Nick deserve huge kudos. We joked that, you know, we started this film because you had some mental health issues that you needed clearing up. And through the process of the film, Nick and Tyler went a little bit crazy trying to make it happen, because they had 400 hours of footage that they edited down into an 88-minute film, and they did all that editing themselves. How about comment on Nick and Tyler and them through this process, and out of those guys?
Yeah, wow, they've worked so hard. It's crazy. I've been, you know, I'm very close with them, so I've watched the whole process of the editing and all of the work that they've done. Never mind the work that they did just to, you know, help get me sober, which was a handful and, you know, a task in itself. But they've done pretty much all of the editing and everything and promotion all on their own, just the two of them. So it's been a lot of work. And yeah, they definitely, both of them need a vacation. Unfortunately, we were set to do our theatrical release starting in New York on March 17th. We're supposed to go there. There have been some theatrical showings, but this was like an official release. And unfortunately, because of COVID, that was not able to happen. So that's really disappointing. But the movie is available online. You can go to dosedmovie.com. Yeah, so we encourage people to see it that way. But yeah, wow, it's amazing the amount of work, hard work, blood, sweat, and tears that these guys have put into this film.
Yeah, it's amazing. Is there a Dosed part 2?
I don't know. You'd have to ask them. I mean, I'm sure there's always another story. Yeah, there's so many stories in this space that are worth telling.
Yeah. Yeah, I think yours is really unique. Like there's never been any kind of film like this before. I don't know if you'd be able to create a film like this again. It's a really unique kind of moment in time that was brought together.
It was very serendipitous how it all just came together and worked out. Yeah.
Yeah. I can answer this one too, but I'll throw it to you first. Compared to other psychedelics, what is it about the Ibogaine experience that makes it especially helpful for overcoming addictions?
Well, from what I know about it, I mean, as I've talked about, I started doing mushrooms, but because I was addicted to heroin, there's that very strong physical component, like heavily addicted to opiates. So the withdrawals are absolutely unbearable. I've tried detoxing without anything before, and it's really unbearable. So Ibogaine specifically helps with that. I'm not sure by what mechanisms. You can probably talk about that a little bit more, but as I was going through my detox, I had very little physical symptoms, and I was on quite a high dose of Cadian and heroin on top of that. So, it was still difficult, as you can see in the film, but not to mention the psycho-spiritual aspect that I experienced with the psychedelics. So it was kind of like a twofold thing for me.
Yeah, yeah. So Ibogaine seems to put people back into an opiate naive state. So when people are physically addicted to opioids, you can go, maybe you start taking opioids and you use them for a couple of weeks straight. And our body has its own pain-killing mechanism, endorphins, among other things. And when you put an opioid in there, then you do that for long enough, then your body's own pain-killing mechanisms start shutting down. So then you take that opioid away and you just start feeling dire pain, and that's the pain of withdrawals. And Ibogaine somehow seems to go in and reset that opioid system. So for me, as somebody who provides the medicine, we will wait until we see somebody in a little bit of withdrawal, and then we administer a small dose of Ibogaine, even just a test dose, and within about 45 minutes, those withdrawals start subsiding. So it's really cool to see, because you start getting people's buy-in right away, whereas only an opioid had taken away their withdrawal prior to this, and then they take Ibogaine and that withdrawal starts going away. So it's pretty powerful. It's really cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another question from the crowd. To sum it up, I think several of us want to know how often Adrianne doses nowadays, micro and macro.
Yeah, so I think the longer I've been sober, the farther between doses. And I think the first dose I did with you with mushrooms was about 3 months or 2 months after I had completed my Ibogaine treatment, and then I may have done another one like 3 or 4 months after that. But I would say probably on average every 4 to 6 months I'll do some kind of sit with mushrooms or another psychedelic. And I haven't really done a whole lot of microdosing, but as I said, I just started doing a microdosing regimen about 2 weeks ago. So I've been doing about 0.15 grams of psilocybin every third day. So I'm trying to stick with that. And I think it's helping. Yeah, it's a really subtle thing, right? So it's not like the macrodose where you've taken it and you can feel the benefits right away. Like the microdose can be a lot more subtle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The question's up on the screen. Did you use MDMA therapy at all?
I haven't done any MDMA therapy. I've been, I guess, maybe a little bit hesitant to do that just because I don't know a lot about it. And I mean, you can probably talk about more about what MAPS is doing with the MDMA trials, but that seems to be more of a guided therapeutic journey, whereas most of the journeys that I've done are pretty self-directed. And I haven't done MDMA, but from what I hear, I see the good news from MAPS that the phase 3 clinical trials seem to be doing really well.
Doing really well, yeah.
Yeah.
That's MDMA assisted psychotherapy. So it's 3 sessions with a lot of counseling before, during, and after. So it's a pretty intensive treatment, and it's for treatment resistant post-traumatic stress disorder. But yeah, we just got the announcement, the kind of first scanning of the initial information from phase 3 indicates that there is a therapeutic benefit, which I think most of us knew there would be, but it's good to have that now. VAPS as well asked a question, which I can answer. How can we get involved with the Canadian Psychedelic Association? So the Canadian Psychedelic Association was set up by a group of, I think there were probably 40 or 50 people here in Vancouver that were focused on what we can do to kind of be a large umbrella where everybody within the psychedelic community in Canada can come under to find common ground, to talk about a lot of the unique issues that come up when you work with these medicines. So we launched we really got our website up on Thank You Plant Medicine Day, which was February 20th, 2020. And since then, we've started doing some forward-facing things for the CPA, like this webinar series. We've got another webinar coming up at the end of the month as well. And we had one a few weeks ago with Dennis McKenna and Wade Davis, Duncan Grady, Gillian Maxwell, Salome Tabrizi. And that was really good as well. Then another forward-facing thing that we're doing right now is the decriminalization petition. So we're very focused on the decriminalization petition right now. The way everybody can help is please help share that. There's a mainstream media campaign that we're launching next week, and hopefully that garners us a lot of attention. And we're going to start putting together a decrim squad, which will be volunteers who are willing to help us really get some eyeballs on this petition and hopefully a lot of signatures on this petition. And then the CPA also, we would like to open it up to professional membership. And right now we're just kind of on a consultation phase. And there are a lot of great psychedelic communities across Canada, and we want their input. So VAPS in particular, and I guess VAPS as just one example of some of these psychedelic societies that are out there in Canada, we're going to start reaching out to a lot of the people that we know are kind of movers and shakers within the psychedelic community to see what would make them want to become a part of the Canadian Psychedelic Association. Because one of the reasons this was put together is as commercialization was coming into the psychedelic space, I saw that there's a lot of infighting within the psychedelic community around some of these larger issues. And it was really disheartening for me, because I figure if we as the psychedelic community, if we as people who have access to these glorious medicines, which can really help unify and, almost give a sense of unity, is a very common thing that happens to people when they take these medicines. If we as this community with access to these substances can't get along, then really what hope is there for the rest of the world? So I think the CPA is aiming to be a place where everybody across Canada that's interested in these substances can come together and kind of find some strength in numbers, as well as, we're focused on decriminalization, but we're also focused on medicalization, and we're focused on making sure commercialization happens in a really good way. So we want those voices to be a part of this as well. So I ask everybody to please have a bit of patience with us. As I've said before, it feels like we've launched a rocket ship and are building this thing mid-air, but we are going to be reaching out to these communities across Canada very soon, and your voice is very important to us, so please bear with us. And I know, you know, as somebody, you are now, Adrianne, a member of this psychedelic community as well. Do you see a need for something like the CPA, or?
Yeah, it's amazing what you guys have been doing, and thank you for all your hard work. I know you've been working away at this for the last few months now, so I'm really excited to see where this goes, and the future looks really bright for psychedelics. So it's a very exciting thing to be a part of.
Yeah, thanks. So we'll just take a few more questions, and I know we agreed we only have so much bandwidth to have a two-way conversation in front of 600 or so people. So we'll wrap it up here fairly shortly. But to Adrianne, do you have a message for people out there suffering with addiction issues? Maybe a message of hope?
Yeah, so much to say. Yeah, I mean, really just hang in there. There's lots of recovery communities, whether it's 12-step or smart recovery or hook in with some friends and family. But yeah, like I said, this isn't something that you can do alone. This isn't something that I could do on sheer willpower. I got really discouraged trying to just, you know, stop. Like I couldn't understand why I couldn't just stop. But, you know, addiction is a really powerful thing. It's not a moral failing. It's not because you're a bad person or like a loser or you don't have the willpower. It's a very powerful mental illness, and reach out and hopefully these medicines will be available to people soon. I'm very grateful for what they have done in my life, and really just be gentle with yourself. I could not have imagined that I thought I was a lost cause. I really did. And there are no lost causes. Like, and anyone, you can do this. So yeah, just hang in there.
Beautiful. Thank you. On another note, can you comment on the way that she turned into a child right after treatment? Is this a common thing? So in the movie, you kind of digress back into almost a childlike state, and then the teenager state after that. Do you remember that happening?
I don't have a lot of recollections, so you're probably best to answer that. I mean, I've seen it on video, but I don't really remember that happening. There was a lot going on. It was very overwhelming, and I was probably quite exhausted and going through a lot mentally from all of that. So I don't quite remember the whole process.
It can happen. Like I've seen that before doing this treatment with people, and I've witnessed it kind of multiple times. And I think that's fairly common in some of the literature that I've read around psychedelics in general, is you can go back into a state where you're even in the womb and then re-experience birth and some of the trauma that happens in birth and recontextualize that, and then into the infancy state and into the toddler state. And it's interesting, like we never, as an ibogaine provider, I would never allow friends or family to be a part of that experience, because there can be a lot of explaining to do. Like in the movie, like Tyler and Nick were witnessing this, and they're like, is this normal? And Maud in the movie is like, yeah, it's normal, no problem. Are you sure? It seems like she's got brain damage. Yep, no problem, don't worry, it's normal. So yeah, it was wild to have the cameras around for sure. So do you think the CPA might become a regulatory body for therapists? I think if so, that'll be a long way away. I think we're kind of positioning ourselves to be a very responsible voice around these medicines, that's for sure, around these substances in general. I would really encourage people to go to psychedelicAssociation.net, and you can leave us your email address so that you can stay in the loop and be a part of what this is. Like, this is really a community initiative. There's 10 people on the board of directors right now who we've been meeting week after week for almost a year now. And really the meetings so far have brought us to a point where this thing has a heartbeat. And that's really what we've been doing so far, is just making sure that this CPA is a thing. And it's at the point now where it's got a heartbeat, and now it is time for us to reach out to the larger community and get feedback as to what this is. So there's another way people can help out if they want. If you go to that website, you can become a friend of the CPA, and that is essentially $100 or $50 donation, which will allow you to support things like these webinars and the decriminalization petition. Like, we're doing Facebook advertising as an example for this decrim petition, so we could use money for that. And in return, through some amazing partners, we have discounts for some conferences which are upcoming, including the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference. You get a discount to that. You get a discount to the Psychedelic Psychotherapy Forum. You can get a discount to Catalyst Calgary, which is actually coming up next weekend. That's another great conference that has a lot of really great speakers at it, just very shortly coming up. And you also get access to the Spirit Plant Medicine back-end website, which has hundreds of hours of really good content around this topic. So I think we're providing almost as much value in return as you get for your donations. So please, people, help us out as a friend of the CPA and help us keep this thing have a heartbeat. And then MAPS Canada, the other association around psychedelics that I'm a part of, they're having a webinar series that's coming up as well. So if you go to the MAPS Canada Facebook page, you can stay in the loop on that. I think at least Dennis McKenna and Paul Stamets are going to be speaking on that. That was the couple names that stuck out to me. So Mark Hayden as well, the executive director of MAPS, you can check him out. And we're aiming to do the next Canadian Psychedelic Association webinar on the 27th. So stay in the loop on that through, again, our Canadian Psychedelic Association Facebook page. We will have a French Facebook page out soon. We will have a French translation to our website out soon. There's, like I say, launched a rocket ship, and we're in the middle of building it as it's flying. So please be patient with us. We've got a lot of cool stuff coming out through the CPA, and we want everybody to be involved. So I think we can wrap this up here, Adrianne. How about, you know, you talked about some words of hope for people with addiction, but what do you think these substances in general for people who are suffering, you know, maybe their mental health isn't feeling all that great in the face of COVID, and who knows what else? What do you think these medicines can do overall for the mental health of our country and beyond?
Yeah, I think there's, you know, great hope. I mean, I think that addiction is just a symptom of, for me, it was just a symptom of a lot of other issues like, you know, depression, anxiety, trauma. So I think there's great hope, and I think research is starting to show that, and has shown that it can be really helpful, especially potentially after, you know, everything that we've been through with COVID. I think there are a lot of people struggling. I worry a lot about people that are struggling and isolated, that were maybe already isolated. You know, I know overdose rates in British Columbia anyways have gone up. So that's something that's very concerning due to social distancing and more social isolation. So I think that hopefully there's a place for psychedelics in the future to help people deal with the trauma of, you know, everything that's gone on in the last few months. So I have a lot of hope going forward. Cool.
Yeah, me too. And like, especially, I'm so glad we caught your story on film, because it's a story that is so common to so many people, and you are such a relatable character and person. So I'm just scrolling through the comments here again on this, and so many people are super grateful that you did this, and you put so much, you know, vulnerability is the key word. Like, you allowed these big guys to follow you around with a camera through this harrowing process, and that makes you extremely unique. I don't know a lot of people that would be willing to do that. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of, you know, being in your life, which was then captured on film. It's helped so many people. It's a remarkable movie. Thanks to Tyler and Nick and Mark Howard and Patrick Fishley and Gareth Moxie and Jeff Akers and all the people who made this film happen, because it's a remarkable piece of art that is inspiring so many people. But it all comes down to you, Adrianne. Thank you so much. You've become
Thank you for having me.
Such a dear friend through this process.
And thank you for all the work that you've been doing. It's really amazing.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I can't wait to see you again and give you a hug.
In real life.
Yeah, in real life. But thanks for taking the time to do this. Thanks to all of our viewers. There are a lot of people who were a part of this. Looks like there's 143 people watching this Zoom stream right now, and a lot more people are going to see this once we post it on our Facebook Live page. So I know so many people really fell in love with you through the movie, and I know they'll be thrilled to have caught up with you here. So thank you so much, Adrianne. Thanks to our whole that for helping put this on, and have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.